In this video, I want to go over managing tables in KDB.AI, specifically how you could get your API keys, connect to a cloud instance, and create and delete tables. The first thing we're going to do is install the KDB.AI client. The KDB.AI client is what we use to interact with our database and with our tables. Next, let's install some libraries. The most important one here is the KDB.AI client library. And now we need some environmental variables to connect to our table. Now let's get our API keys that we need to connect to our KDB.AI client. And to get those, we could go to KDB.AI and we could click this login button if we're already signed up. Now this should take us to cloud.kdb.ai. And now we could get our credentials by clicking connection details and taking this endpoint URL, and also by copying an API key. Now if you don't already have an API key, you could click this add API key button right here. I already have my credentials set, but if you don't, you could just define them. And now I can connect to my session. And if at any point you're confused about a function, you could use this question mark operator to find the arguments of a particular function and example usage. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that no table name documents already exist. So I'm going to check our cloud instance and I'm going to go to a table and drop any table called documents. Now I don't have a table named documents, so what I could do is I could list all the tables in my session. Here I already have a table, but if you're just getting started with KDB.AI, it's likely you're just going to get an empty list. That's perfectly okay. Now let's define our schema. Now our schema is going to have two columns. It's going to have an ID, which is just a string, and it's also going to have a vectors column. This vectors column is going to have a vector index with 8 dimensions, which means the vectors that we're going to insert are going to always have to be 8 dimensions. It's going to have a similarity metric. In this case, it's L2, which is the same as Euclidean distance. And we're going to use a flat index. Now, we could use any index here for this example. Flat indexes have the advantage of saving a little bit of memory, and they're decently fast for small data sets. Now let's actually create a table. Now that we've created our table, let's define some data that we can insert. Here we have an array of vectors. Each vector has 8 dimensions. And we want to make sure that these are float 32 arrays. And let's also define some IDs. And let's create a data frame with these IDs and vectors as columns. If we look at these embeddings, we see that we have an ID and a vector for every single row. And then we are ready to insert these embeddings into our database. Now that we've inserted our embeddings into our table, what we could do now is we could actually search our table. So here we have an 8-dimensional vector that we're using to search, and we only want one vector as a response, and that's what we get here. We get the closest vector to the one we searched. And finally, let's actually delete our table to conserve cloud resources. So we do this with table.drop. And that's it. In this video, we learned how to get our API keys, create a table, insert data, and delete our table when we're done with it. In the next one, I want to dive deeper into all the different kinds of queries that we can make with KDB.AI. So I'll see you in the next one.